Hey, HopeQuest family, Troy and Melissa here for another episode of Hope for Today, where we try to give you a little bit of hope that will carry you through this day and on through the week. And we are so incredibly grateful that you're here with us today. And you'll notice that we are standing because Melissa has a preference of standing. I have a preference of sitting. But I love Melissa, and so I want to, at times, love her as well as I can by honoring her preferences. So here we are, standing. We'll see where we end up next week. But we talked last week, and I hope you'll listen to that again or listen to it for the first time if you haven't. We talked about conflict and why it is that conflict is so distressing or difficult for us. And we unpacked that in a way that helped us kind of end up at this spot where when we can't resolve conflict, we kind of end up at the spot of hopelessness or despair. And we wanted to kind of talk about how we get to that place and how our reactions kind of feed us down this predictable path that doesn't end up resolving conflict. So when we think about that predictable path, you know, Melissa, we think about when we have conflict and how difficult that conflict is sometimes. And for me, when I think about someone I love does something that hurts me or disappoints me.
And for me, it's when someone I love is upset or angry with me.
When this happens, our brains can perceive it as a life-threatening situation.
Which, of course, creates a survival response. And we know these as fight, flight, or freeze.
And these reactions happen rapidly, automatically, reflexively, without any thought whatsoever.
And unfortunately, they also send unintended messages to the people that we love.
And those unintended messages, of course, cause the conflict to escalate, not resolve.
So, honey, what is your typical survival response?
Gosh, I tend to just kind of, I'm very chill, very calm, very relaxed.
Liar, pants on fire.
Even killed. You know, for me, when we have a conflict or when you do something that makes me feel afraid or makes me feel overwhelmed or makes me feel inadequate, I tend to, my response is fight.
Right.
And I want to kind of face the problem head on. And really my goal is to attack the problem before it hurts me and before it has a negative impact on me. Because I think if I can fight it, I can conquer it and avoid getting hurt.
Okay.
What about you?
Well, I would definitely fall into the flight or freeze category. So for me, the emotional experience of the uh-oh feeling, like uh-oh, someone's disappointed in me or uh-oh, someone's angry with me, automatically kicks in this need to make the problem smaller, try to minimize the problem. Again, and that's so protective. I don't want your disappointment or anger or rejection. So, you know, I'm doing everything I can to make the problem smaller or go away. And in all of that is to try to reassure myself or get my anxiety lower.
So for both of us, whether it's fight or flight, we are trying to kind of minimize the conflict. Me, I'm going to try to fight so I don't get hurt. Melissa's going to try to kind of disappear or run away so that she doesn't get hurt. But the goal is the same. We don't want to get hurt. Who wants to get hurt? But these responses don't ever actually result in resolving the conflict.
They don't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In fact, they often make the conflict way worse.
And why is that?
Well, because of the unintended messages they're sending. So, you know, I'm curious for you, what is it like when I minimize the problem or try to make it smaller or flat out run away or just ignore that there's a problem in the first place?
So Melissa, the unintended message that I get from you when you begin to either run away or freeze are things like, Troy, you're overreacting. Troy, your feelings are too much. They're not valid. They're not important. Troy, you're on your own. You're going to have to solve this problem by yourself. Or the biggest one is, I don't really care about you. You take your problem and you go deal with it because I don't really want to be with you in the midst of this problem. And so those are the messages I get. And on a good day, I realize that's not what you're trying to communicate.
Right.
But on a bad day, those are the things I hear.
And when you start hearing those messages, what happens in you?
Well, I get more frustrated, and I feel more in danger, and I feel more vulnerable, and so things ramp up and get more intense, and I get more angry because, again, I felt like this was dangerous, and I felt like you were trying to hurt me in the midst of this, and now I'm realizing, yes, she is trying to hurt me in the midst of this.
So you start believing the worst, even worse about me.
Yes, worse about you and worse about me and worse about the situation.
Right.
What about you? What are the unintended messages that you hear when I get all big and fluffy, like you like to say? What is it that you hear from me?
Well, I hear, I'm not okay, and it's your job to fix me.
Okay.
All right, you've got to make me okay in this moment. So I feel pressure.
You have to fix me somehow,
Yes.
and the situation.
Right, exactly. And then another message I get is, I have to feel the same way as you for you to be okay. In other words, I have to agree with everything you're thinking, and sometimes those thoughts are irrational. And so that puts me in this that puts me in this no-win place where I don't want to agree with what you're thinking because it's not true. But if I don't agree, I can't. You're not going to be okay.
Right.
And then I think the other thing that feels very alone is you have to be right. The message is you have to be right. My voice doesn't matter. My perspective doesn't matter in this moment. And unless I just kind of cave and say you're right, this conflict is not going to go away.
Yeah, and I can see how you feel that way because there's a part of me that has to be right in order to feel safe. And so even though that's not really, I know that won't resolve the conflict, there's a part of me that feels that. So let me ask you this question. What's really going on? If those messages that I'm hearing aren't really what you're believing or what you're intending, what are you really trying to say with your response?
Well, I think mostly I'm feeling fear, and it's getting in the way of me joining you, right? I'm either frozen. I can, depending on the intensity of the anger, I can get really frozen and stuck and like, oh no.
Right.
And really what I'm trying to do is make the problem smaller so your anger or your intensity can go down so that we can work on it together. I don't want to leave you alone. I'm actually trying to help you regulate your anger so we can work on the problem together.
Right.
But I'm also dealing with my own fears about your disapproval, rejection, all of that.
Well, the good news is next week we'll talk about the right way to go about kind of resolving this conflict. But in the meantime, I appreciate that that's really what's going on. Although, again, it's very, very hard for me to hear that and receive that. For me, what I'm feeling in the midst of all that conflict, when I'm angry, what I'm really feeling is I'm scared to death. And I don't know what to do. And I'm afraid, I'm overwhelmed. And I wish someone could help me, but I'm afraid no one can or will help me. So I'm just going to fight my way out of this so that I can minimize the pain that I experience. And I'm thinking to myself, I love you and I wish I could let you help me, but I'm too afraid. And that fear just ratchets up my intensity.
Sounds like a really hard place.
It can be. It can be. And then I hate how I respond when I'm in that hard place, and it just kind of makes the whole situation a lot worse. So sweetheart, next week we're going to kind of unpack the full solution. But for today, what can we do if we notice the fact that we are fighting, flying, or freezing, and we notice these unintended messages? What can we do right now?
So I think, like we talked about last week, just becoming aware of what's happening. In a moment when the two of us are not upset or we're not in a conflict, we can talk about, hey, when I do that, what does that tell you? What message does that send? And getting to know each other a little bit about, our own responses and becoming aware of that within ourselves helps us maybe press the pause button next time a conflict happens.
Well, and I love that idea of pressing the pause button, because in the midst of any conflict, whether we're running away or whether we're fighting, a timeout is always very, very helpful. And I think what we can best do is to be aware of what's going on, be aware of the emotions that are rising within us that are pushing us to these extremes, and also be aware that you are sending an unintended message. You may think you are screaming for help, but what you're really screaming for is not helpful, and it's not going to get you help. Mm-hmm. And so be aware, press that pause button, and there's really hope in the midst of conflict. And next week, we are going to unpack our simple little pathway, if you will, that will lead not to increased conflict, but actual resolution and real connection. So look forward to you joining us next week. In the meantime, if you would like or share this video, that would be a huge encouragement to us and to others. As you share this video, others are able to be helped and encouraged by this video and our whole series on conflict, and also Why Is Everyone So Angry 2 weeks ago. Our most popular video ever so far. So we're grateful for you, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. And know that I hope that you have a very hopeful day and week this week.